Broadcasts of the City of Neenah Common Council meetings are produced by University Studios of the University of Wisconsin-Fox Valley. Neenah residents can get information about City Council meetings, City Committee meetings, meeting agendas, and other documents via the City website, www.neenahgov.org. Neenah residents can express their opinions about city issues or about these broadcasts by contacting the mayor's office, contacting their city alderman, or by completing the electronic feedback form on the city website, www.neenahgov.org. All public portions of the meetings are recorded in entirety and are not edited for playback.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Common Council meeting for the City of Neenah on Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023. Please indicate your presence on your roll call device and answer as the clerk calls the roll.
Alderperson Boyette. Erickson.
Here.
Hillstrom.
Here.
Lundrum.
Here.
Steiner is excused. Stevenson.
Here.
Skirms.
Here.
Weber.
Here.
And Borchert.
Here.
Our devices are.
Oh, there we go. I don't even.
Alderman Erickson, you are not absent. We will record you as present. There we go. Alderman Erickson will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States, to the republic. The first item on the agenda tonight is the 2022 audit presentation by John Rader, Managing Director of Baker Tilly. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. Is this on? Seems like it is. Okay, great. Thank you for having me here tonight. I think I'm a familiar face to some of you, but certainly not all of you. I know there are new faces up in front of me. So as mentioned, I'm John Rader. I've been associated with the city's audit for the last several years. And as I go through the materials and the handout I think that all of you have as part of your packet, and I'll have it up here too and scroll through it. If you have questions, don't stop or don't hesitate to stop and ask me, or you can wait to the end. It really doesn't matter to me. I am going to spend most of the time on the graphs, but I want to mention a couple of things. Where we're at, we issued our final financial statements on June 26th this year. That's kind of a critical date because the city has a deadline of June 30th to submit their financials, and they're called an Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. It's a mouthful, we say ACFR, to the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, for their review. It will hopefully be for the 40th consecutive year that you're going to, achieve this excellence in financial reporting. It's the highest level of financial reporting governments can achieve, and it's throughout the U.S. and Canada. And 40 years in a row is really very commendable. So hopefully you get that once again. We issued two different reports as part of our audit. One are the financial statements, and we do prepare the city's financial statements, the bulk of it, not all of it, just like we do for a lot of the governments that we audit, probably 90-some%. And the other is the audit results. In the financial statements, just a couple things to point out. We're not going to flip through all those pages. I won't drag you through that, but they are extensive because the city has quite a few different funds. I want to mention that we issued what's called an unmodified opinion or clean opinion on your financials, which means it prepared according to generally accepted accounting principles or GAAP. That means you followed all the different accounting rules that are applicable out there these days, and there's 101 of them, which is, they don't all apply, but a lot of them do. And there was one significant one for the city of Neenah this year that you had to implement. You had about a 3-year lead-in to prepare for this, and it's GASB 87 regarding leases. And the GASB gave governments all this time, one, because of COVID, but two, because it was such a big lift. There's a lot that goes into evaluating all the different agreements that exist throughout the city, and they can be on the debtor side for lessee, or on the ownership side of the lessor. And the city of Neenah, just like not all, but most places that we went to this year did not have material debt-based agreements. And so we're talking copiers and small things like that. And when you add it up, it just isn't material to financial statements, but it sure is a heck of a lot of work to track all this and account for it. So that was not material and did not show up in your statements. On the lessor side, that's a different story. Water towers, cell tower leases and such are prevalent throughout our state. And so they exist here in the city, and looking at that with Andy and Vicki, you've got a new receivable on your books, most of it in the water fund, but some of it in the general fund as well, of $9.7 million, okay? It doesn't really affect your fund balance or your bottom line because it's all balance sheet, but that does get pulled into there, it gets updated each year, and a lot of financial statement disclosures, all kinds of fun stuff. So that was a fair amount of work, but the city did a nice job of preparing for that and successfully implemented. The other report that I mentioned, the audit results, again, I'm not going to walk you through that. That has a host of information in there, including some required communications by our standards, the AICPA sets. What are our responsibilities as an auditor? There's sometimes a misunderstanding of what an audit is, so it tries to clarify that. Talks about other upcoming GASBs. It also points out internal control matters. And there's nothing new in there this year. There's one point up front about what I just said. We prepare the city's financials just like we do most places. And that comment gets reported if we have material adjustments or we prepare your financial statements. And we had one material adjustment this year. And I say that because most places, I usually consider 10 or fewer to be really good. To have one, and I think there was maybe one last year, I don't recall, that's outstanding. And not just for the audit, but for your budget process and just getting, if you step in, take a look at your financial records now, you can look at it with a lot of assurance that we've got good records. You have a great team making sure that happens. There's a couple IT recommendations that have been updated in there. I do believe at least one of those, if not both, will be resolved in 2023 with some changes going on in that department with Joe. And an update on the court deficit between Neenah and Menasha. That deficit has been in existence. It's a financial deficit. Basically, the fee structure isn't enough to cover the cost of that court system, and so that gets updated each year. All right. I'm going to jump into the actual numbers, unless anybody has any questions on that. So in your slides, the second page, we have a bar graph here, and this is focusing on your general fund, which, as you know, is your primary operating fund of the city, as it is everywhere. And in governmental fund balance reporting, you can have up to 5 different categories. And I'm going to start at the bottom here, that non-spendable is very minimal. The light blue are the 2022, for comparative purposes, black is 2021. So just $25,000, like I said, a small amount of your total fund balance. That's a GAAP requirement just for prepaids that existed at the year end. Nothing restricted, committed, assigned. These are amounts, $216,000, that's comprised of amounts that the Finance Committee sets aside. So the library transactions are tracked within the general fund and accounted for within the fund balance, and that's $11,000. Carry forwards are 60, and the balance is about $145,000, and that's being applied to the budget you're operating in now in 2023. Use of fund balance, as we say. Everything else goes into unassigned. And so you can see a pretty dramatic decrease in the current year, 5 million down to 3.4. And that decrease of 1.6 million is being driven entirely by a loss on your investments. And I want to clarify that. So the GASBs, specifically 40, requires the city, all governments, to mark their investments to fair market value at the end of the year. So you have a nice-sized portfolio that is comprised of, in large part, governmental securities, fixed income securities. Those took a steep decline the last 2 years. The only way you would realize that is if you sold them at year end. And you, just like all other governments that we audit that experience this, would never do that. The intent is you hold them until maturity and you recover what you paid in, and you get the income, or the revenue streams from the interest as you hold them throughout their term. So this is an unrealized loss, but GAAP requires you to recognize it in the current year. Okay? So just some clarity on that. You can see how that plays out in the middle here. A very high-level summarized income statement. You've got actual amounts compared to budget in the middle of this first page. So your revenues, again, came in 1.9 under budget. 2.1 of that is because of the investments. Paper loss, so to speak. Expenditures, they came in under budget of $434,000 because there were some savings in a variety of departments, but primarily in police and parks. Now, the details of this, if you're interested, are in the back of the financial statements on pages 71 to 74. The other thing I should have said right at the outset is there are several documents the city does prepare for its financials, and one is the management discussion and analysis, the MD&A. Your ACFR is a big document, like I said, but if you look at that, 10, 12 pages, it's like an executive summary. It kind of tells where the city was in 21 versus 22 and how it got there. And that will explain a lot of these variances too. And Andy and Vicki put that together and do a real nice job on it. All right, so.
John?
Yes.
So I can't go by that. So our $1.9 million hit in revenues, you're saying is due to reduction in our asset base, but our asset value. But we must rely on those assets to generate revenue so that we can expend them, right?
You do. I don't have it offhand what you budget for investment income. I assume it, like most places, it's pretty conservative. Mm-hmm. You not only got nothing, it was negative. So again, there was no cash flow related to it, but it does affect fund balance.
Well, I think as the finance committee reviews it, it'd be good to understand.
We did bring this before the finance
Okay.
committee, so they were
All right.
aware of that. And we hold them till maturity, so, and they're all fixed income, they're not stocks and volatile. So we will not recognize this loss in the end. But
But if we're line iteming revenue, cash revenues to bring in during the calendar year so that we can cover expenses with it, those are real dollars that we didn't get. Is that correct? We did not see the investment dollar.
Just to clarify, so if they had had a gain, you would not have seen those dollars come in, so to speak, either. Because these have maturities that go out several years, up to 10 years, I think. I don't know your exact portfolio, but they go out quite a ways. So when they sell, you'll get all that money back, and you always get the interest on it, just like a CD, practically. So the true cash flow continues throughout the term of that maturity. It's just the market fluctuates up and down. And so that's why a lot of places do really consider a paper loss. For your financial statements, I think for water, certainly for general fund, I think both, we present it as such in the back of the financials, in the detailed statements, so that we broke that component out of investment income. So it's very clear what's from an unrealized loss versus true investment income, like on a checking or savings account. So I don't know if that addresses your question.
No, but I'll go talk to Vicki.
Okay, yeah.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
That's okay. Could you equate that with your own personal retirement account? And you can't touch it until you're 59 and a half because that's the maturity date. And so when you're looking every day, you're having a heart attack, you're having a great day, you're having a heart, you know what I mean? It's so volatile. But you really have to realize that it won't mature until you are allowed to take that out. So there's no cause for concern right now because you're nowhere near your maturity date. Can we kind of equate it with that?
I think so. I mean, you want to look at it long term.
Right, that's what I mean.
Not where it's at right now.
That's what I mean.
Right.
Instead of looking at like today's stock market and seeing that your pension has dropped, well, you can't touch it anyway, you know, until a certain age.
That is true.
So we can't necessarily worry about each day.
The one additional distinction between compared it to a retirement fund is retirement, once you reach retirement, and I'm not there yet, obviously, but you have to make certain draws. Where these fixed income securities, they're held to the very end. You know what you're going to get. So it's not going to be, well, I hope this time's out okay. It will.
Right.
You're going to get back,
Right.
you're not going to have a big gain or loss. You're just going to get back what you paid in, and then you'll get that 2% that it pays throughout
Right.
the term of it.
Right, thanks.
I don't know if that adds much clarity, but yeah,
A little bit.
yeah. Okay. And Neenah's not unique. We saw this in every place we audited in other states as well, obviously. Very similar. Okay, so what does that mean? Metric that we throw out there each year for the city is we map that out. And so we take your unassigned and your assigned fund balance, which is the bulk of it, and we compare that to how much you spend, expenditures. And that's kind of an indicator of, like, if you didn't collect another dime at the end of the year, how many months could you continue to pay the bills? And that shows the strength of your general fund. So at the end of 2022, the red line is your general fund here. And you can see, because of that investment loss, you went for what has traditionally been around 19, 20% down to 13.6%. So it did take a dive downwards. The GFOA, again, recommends keeping 2 months or 17 to 18%, so that's that light blue line there. Now, the one caveat I want to put out there is Neenah's unique might be too strong of a word, but most governments don't set aside benefit savings in a separate fund. They keep it in the general fund. But this is something that, you know, predates me. I think predates Mike. Maybe it went back to Ted. I don't know. But it's been in place for a long time, where the city has, with great foresight, set aside as much as they could fund for the various benefits. And so we also put in here that purplish line of, if you combine your general and your employee benefits fund, internal service, where would you be? And you can see you would be at 23%, okay? So comfortably above that 2 months. Now, a couple other things. Other places that we audit, if you're interested, and I always say this with some hesitation, are those blue dots in Wisconsin of your size based on population. So they're closer to the 40%, okay? One thing you might want to consider is at the very top here, we note that the city doesn't have a fund balance policy. If you did, we would, based upon the language in it, we would recast this to show you how you compare to your policy. So I've talked to Vicki and Andy about this. It might be something that the city wants to consider going forward, along with the committee, of adopting a policy. And if you do, I think I've offered some suggestions. I'm available for discussion on it. But the main thing to build into it is flexibility. You don't want to say, we're going to be at this number. I mean, that's just not realistic. You want to have a range, and then what do you do when it goes over, and what do you do when it goes under? It's planning ahead. Now, with all that said, other than this last year, your fund balance has been very stable in the general fund. There aren't concerns of that nature. But with a policy, you kind of know we're at where we want to be. And I know bond rating agencies have asked about this in the past, and there's been an informal approach, certainly, but it's something you might want to consider formalizing. Okay. Switching gears, we're going to talk about debt. So general obligation debt, we usually present on a statutory basis, and that's what this is here. This black line is your statutory, your debt limit, your 5% of your equalized value. So that is at 136 million. So it went up about 7.2%. Nice steady increase over the last 5 years, and certainly a bump upwards this year, which again, we've seen it almost everywhere we've been. Compare that to the amount of GO debt outstanding, and you're at $77.6 million, we'll say. So you're utilizing 57% of your debt capacity. Last year it was 47%, so it went up 10% this year. A fairly large portion of this debt is outstanding, as you know, for your TIFs. You have very active TIFs and several TIFs open. During the year, the city issued $26 million in GO debt. You paid down 8.3, but 9.8 of that 26 was issued to refund bonds that are outstanding in the CDA fund for TIF 8. So TIF 8 has, since I think the creation of the CDA, I should say, since the creation of TIF 8, has held leased revenue bonds for those improvements. Okay, you got to think of the CDA and TIF 8 running together. They've had a decrease of about $1 million a year for the last several years, but this year, as you can see in the very bottom of this, the CDA's debt went from 15.5 down to 4.5. So pretty steep decline, okay? You know, the advantage of having the least revenue bonds, it didn't count against your debt capacity. You know, I'm not a bond advisor, so I don't know how important that is, but it shifted back to the TIF this year with those GO bonds, and as you know, rates have been very low. So what else can I say? The other thing about this, on the bottom, you can see the makeup of the GO bonds, and of that 77 that I mentioned, 11 of it is in the utility fund. If you back, and that's obviously not being paid with levy or increment, it's being paid with user fees. So if you back that out, that 57% becomes 48%, okay? Again, is that a good or bad number? It depends. You know, you have good debt management, you work closely with Baird on all this, and a large portion of it is for the TIFs, and there's no concern for the audits, from the audit standpoint.
John, I have one more question, sorry.
Okay.
And when you say refund, I like to clarify that you mean refinance, not refund the way we would think of
Refinance,
refunding.
right. You
So
replace one debt with another.
refinancing. So it's actually RE-fund. So you're refunding, refinancing,
Yeah.
not refunding, right?
You refinance.
Yeah.
Yep, correct. That is correct. Yes. Yep. Any questions on the GO debt outstanding? If not, the next slide, again, looks at debt. Pretty straightforward here, just what do you pay in debt service compared to your other non-capital expenditures. Very flat line, again, gets back to that good debt management, paying close attention to that. So about 25%. These are all governmental funds, okay? These are not utility. So very, very much of a flat line. Okay. Shifting gears one more time. So these last three slides are taking a look at your three utility funds. And I'm not the primary auditor of those. We have a separate team that comes out from Baker Tilly. Jody Dobson is a partner on this. And I believe she presents, or maybe has already, to the Utility Commission. But she left me some notes. So for the water utility fund, you can see this graph here. The blue line are the revenues, very flat, which is typical of a water utility. And the expenses are the black line here. So there was a slight increase in the expenses this year because of some costs related to a sludge lagoon cleanout during the year. That affected the actual rate of return above. So the PSC sets your authorized rate of 7.5%. That's a calculated amount. And the actual rate of return it was just below 7%. And it decreased from the prior year slightly because of exactly what I just said, that slight increase in expenses while flatlining revenues. Another financial metric for utility funds is how much do you have in unrestricted reserves? So this is cash. You've got restricted cash because of bond covenants, but you have unrestricted cash, which is available for everything else. And the number of months on hand at the end of the year was just over 10. So that's a healthy number. The rating agencies typically look for 6 to 12, so you're right in that range, okay? 3 months for liquidity, 3 to 6 months, potentially more for unanticipated capital costs, maintenance, things like that, unexpected things that could hit this fund. So you're in a comfortable area there. Your debt coverage, again, because you've got revenue bonds outstanding, this is a compliance issue. You're in compliance every year for the last 5 years. And at the very bottom, you can see a bar graph that presents how much of your capital or plant was financed through earnings or equity, and how much has been financed through debt. So the debt financed 57%, which is a little bit more than we typically would see. We recommend generally about 50% or less to be financed through debt. But my understanding is a lot of the infrastructure is being replaced for water right now, so some capital-intensive costs running through there. Sewer fund, again, very similar, except that it's not regulated by this PSC, as you're aware. Revenues, still over expenses for all 5 years presented here, creating a positive operating margin. But there was a slight decrease in the revenues as a result of a decrease in the volume being treated. And so you just want to be cognizant or aware of this. If those continue to inch closer to each other, it might be time to revisit your rate structure for the sewer fund. Unrestricted reserves, very similar numbers to water, again, right around 10. And as far as investment in capital, this fund has the majority, or 62%, coming from equity or earnings. Okay. And then lastly, your stormwater fund. So stormwater, again, really stable operations. A lot of that stability is because it has financed the improvements through debt. I audit a number of places who just do it on a cash basis, so you see the expenses bouncing all over the place. But when you do it through debt, it creates a lot more stability. Revenues are very flatlining. Cash reserves are at 16, so again, a good healthy number. In compliance every year with the debt coverage, and 75% of its plant or capital being financed through earnings. So that fund is in good shape as well. Just two other things I want to mention. We've got 6 other audits going on in the city right now. I know it sounds like a lot, but one is a compliance audit, a single audit, because of the ARPA funds you received. So that's going to get going in a couple of weeks. But then we have 5 audits well, 5 TIFs are going through their life cycle audits, so to speak. Each TIF has 3 audits during its life, and 2 are being audited with 100%, and the closeout at the same time, 5 and 6, I believe. And then 3 others are at either the 30% or 100%. So those are continuing. And we're asking Chris's office in finance for a lot of different documents. The only other thing I want to mention, unless you have questions, is I really want to emphasize how well prepared the city is for our audit. And it has been like that since I've been coming up here. But we appreciate that. I mean, we bring a full team in for a very busy week, and you guys are ready to go. And we appreciate that. It helps us keep costs down. We're able to audit instead of fixing things all the time and such. And we don't always see that. So you've got a great team here, and that leads to a really good audit. Any questions for me?
Thank you so much and for all your work on this, and thank you to Vicki and Andy as well for all your hard work. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the 2022 Economic Impact of Tourism in the Fox Cities, presented by Pam Seidel, the Executive Director of Fox Cities Convention and Visitors Bureau. Welcome, Pam.
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for having me on after the audit. I appreciate that. So, I always say I work in the toy department of economic development, so maybe I'll be your entertainment for the evening. Thank you for your time. I did want to thank the City of Neenah for your ongoing support of tourism. For most of you, you've seen me before. For those new, the City of Neenah is one of 19 municipalities served by the Fox Cities Convention and Visitors Bureau. We basically serve the contiguous communities from Kaukauna through Neenah over to Sherwood, Hortonville, down the 76 corridor, everything in between Oshkosh and Green Bay, so to speak. And as one of our funding municipalities, we're funded with hotel motel room tax for our operations, and you're also part of the Fox Cities Tourism Zone that funds several large tourism infrastructure projects that I'll reference in my presentation. So 2022 was a great year. Visitors directly spent $558 million in the Fox Cities. And I love to roll out these numbers because I think a lot of us, well, aside from me, but a lot of locals don't see us as a tourism destination. We have such a diversified economy. And so I don't think they appreciate the many visitors we do have here in our community. So visitors spent directly $558 million for a total economic impact of $729 million. But 6,700 total jobs were generated in the tourism and hospitality industry, and it's about $62 million in state and local taxes were generated by their spending. This you can see over the last 5 years. What we do is we purchase a study that is a subset of the Wisconsin Department of Tourism's annual study. They study the entire state of Wisconsin. They release those numbers by county. Because I serve 19 communities in parts of 3 counties, I don't use any of the county data per se. So I buy a subset of the data that's just the 19 municipalities we serve. So this is direct spending in the Fox Cities. You can obviously see in 2019, we had what was at that time our record-setting year of 511 million. And it was the first time we went over half a million dollars or $500 million. Then 2020 happened. We all know what happened there, so we're just going to move on. 2021, we did have a nice recovery, and then you can see a very strong recovery in 2022. Oops. Where do visitors spend their money? You know, logical things: food and beverage, lodging. Retail is still very strong here in the Fox Cities at 21% of the total spend. Recreation and entertainment is our fastest growing area. That's things like PIC tickets, Timber Rattlers tickets. We're very lucky here in the Fox Cities. We have a lot of free attractions. So our spending is a little lower than average in those areas because we have places like the Bergstrom Mall and Museum that don't charge admission, but that are wonderful attractions. Our nature centers too, great attractions, most don't charge a fee. But that spending is the single biggest grower in our area. And then transportation, and that's rental cars, plane fares, those types of things. Apologies. Okay. About 4,800 jobs directly supported in tourism. Like every industry, we are struggling with workforce. You can see the employment in 2019. We're still not at 2019 employment levels. Certainly our industry was hit probably the hardest in the pandemic. A lot of people left the industry for other industries, and same story as everyone else, just looking for good people in all areas of the industry. So the researchers look at, from the generators of direct spending from visitors, each household in the Fox Cities would need to be taxed an additional $827 per year to replace the tourism revenue taxes generated that fall to the state and local governments here. This is a bit of an eye chart, but I wanted to kind of show, you know, coming out of a pandemic, we're back on what I would consider a normal trend. The light blue line that's below, that's 2020. This is hotel occupancy. 2021 is the green line, the bright green line. And then 22 is the dark navy line, and 2023 is the rust color line. You can see we're back on what I would consider a normal trend for hotel occupancy. One area that's still off, pandemic-induced, is business travel. We're seeing that across the country. And what's happening is business travel is sort of compressing, really fueled by work from home and or hybrid work. What hotels are seeing is where that business traveler used to be in the office 5 days a week, they'd happily get on a plane on a Sunday, fly in Sunday night, do a Sunday night to Thursday, stay on a business trip. Now, if they're working from home on Monday and Friday, they don't get on that plane till Monday night or Tuesday morning. And so you're seeing a Tuesday through Thursday or Friday stay, so those business stays are compressing, and it's that midweek that we're seeing the opportunity yet. Room revenue has been really off the charts. So you can see here that again, light blue is 2020, 2021 was really coming back. 2022, record-setting room revenue. This is partially inflation-induced. As hotels are spending more for workforce and supplies, you're spending more on your hotel room. You know, to the credit of my hotel partners, this isn't falling to their bottom line. This is going for more costs and services. If there is a silver lining to inflation in my world, it's that this increase in higher room revenue causes more room tax generation, which means more income for my organization and more income on the bonds for the projects that we funded with room tax. So just a brief overview for those who may not be aware, the Fox Cities room tax is 10% on a hotel stay. How that's divided is 30% goes to the Appleton Redevelopment Authority to fund the bonds, the construction bonds on the Fox Cities Exhibition Center. That project is the construction was fully funded, is fully funded with bonding and paid for by room tax from 10 municipalities. You are one of them. The 30% goes to the town of Grand Chute CDA for the debt on the Community First Champion Center of Fox Cities, paying on those bonds. 28.5% goes to my organization for operations, and then each of the municipalities retains about 1.15%. There are two major room tax funded projects, very similar projects, really kind of once in a generation projects, and kudos to, you know, this area and you and all the other municipalities. These are, you know, tourism generating projects, the Fox Cities Exhibition Center, Champion Center, both around $30 million. Exhibition Center opened in January of 2018. Champion Center opened in November of 2019. Owned by the redevelopment authorities or CDA in each of those communities. The Exhibition Center is operated by the Hilton Appleton Paper Valley. Community First Champion Center is operated by Fox City Sports Development. Both have an economic impact, you know, above $6 million, up to $8 million for the Champion Center at a full, and actually 2022 for the Champion Center was probably the first full normal year of operation. As I said, it opened in November 2020, was immediately closed in March of, or opened in November of 2019, immediately closed in March of 2020 for 2 months. I want to spend a little time. So Champion Center, my organization is a bit closer to. As I mentioned, it's operated as an administrator by Fox City Sports Development, which is an aligned 501c3 organization of the CVB, has a common board of directors to the CVB's board of directors. This facility really has, is exceeding all expectations from the time it opened. Activities in 2022 took place on 357 out of 365 days of the year. Tournaments and games took place on 48 of 52 weekends, and that's only because in 2022, Christmas and New Year's fell on a weekend. We actually did a basketball tournament on Easter weekend in 2022. Depending on holiday weekends, we can push, you know, up to probably 50 of 52 weekends out of the year for this year. 66 tournaments that generated over $4.2 million in direct visitor spending at businesses in the Fox Cities. We have actually had the managers of Shields and Lululemon at the mall call the Champion Center and say, please tell me the next time you have a tournament because I've been overrun, and Lululemon one weekend sold out of leggings during a girls' volleyball tournament. And that's, I mean, I tell that as an anecdote, but that's the point, right? These are loss leaders. They are economic generators. And they're putting people out into the community to spend money. Roughly 98% of the participants at the Champion Center are 18 years old or younger. We do have some home teams that are local user groups. NHM Hockey, which is Neenah's co-op hockey team. The Champion Center is their home rink. You can catch them usually Tuesdays and Thursdays for home games. Valley Figure Skating and the Lawrence University women's hockey team will be coming to the Champion Center in the fall and using that rink as their home ice. In late December, we transitioned the operations management from a third-party company called Sports Facilities Management out of Florida to Fox City Sports Development. The model for operating just seemed to work to have more local oversight. The staff, the management staff that was there remains on site and has now become employees of Fox City Sports Development. And their highlight for the year is they sold 8,730 slushies at the concession stand. Want to show a little bit of the growth over the first 3 years of the Champion Center from 2020 to 2022. You can see the total tournaments and the direct visitor spending north of $4 million. Event participants, 37,000 plus this year, and spectators well over almost 58,000 spectators. What I like about the Champion Center specifically is it's the perfect image of what tourism can do to increase the quality of life for your local residents. This facility is funded by hotel motel room tax. So it's visitors pay a tax, the funds pay the bonds. The construction of the whole $31 million is being funded by tourism tax, not local property tax. And yet we built a beautiful 164,000 square foot facility that our local residents Mondays through Fridays can use. And it is booked full Monday through Friday from 3 p.m. till 9 p.m. at night. Total practice hours, you can see there over the last 3 years, over 7,000, nearing 8,000 total practice hours. We have 15 club volleyball teams, club volleyball organizations. 64 club volleyball teams use this as their home court. NHM's hockey, as I mentioned in Lawrence, we have 50 club basketball teams that use it as their home court. So, and practice participants, well over nearly 60,000 practice participants. During the summer, it's been very busy the last couple months with sports camps every day. So we're approaching over 80 sports camps last year. We're probably going to hit to 95 this year. And then we also do open skates. And we had a lot of open skate participants this year. Yeah.
Do you have ice year-round?
We have one rink in year-round. So the Champion Center is essentially what I'll call 3 pods. It's a permanent ice rink, a permanent field house with 4 basketball, 8 volleyball courts, and then 1 seasonal arena that flips between hard court and ice. So right now the court is in for club basketball season in early October. That will be converted back to an ice rink.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Finally, I wanted to share a little bit about some new technology that we've been using, and we're relatively new with this. We've got about 18 months of data, but we've only been actively using it for our planning for probably the last 6 months. We're using a company called Zartico to identify where our visitors are coming from and what they do when they're here. This is, traditional Big Brother. It's your cell phone pinging towers. There's definitely some learning curves with it, but we are able to geofence communities. And so my staff took the city of Neenah and did a summary on where visitors, and a visitor is defined as someone from over 50 miles away who spends more than 2 hours in this community and goes to at least one, what we consider points of interest, and we have those logged in a system. So your top origin markets for visitors are Milwaukee, Wausau Rhinelander, Chicago, Madison, Minneapolis. The Green Bay Appleton Metro, we think of that as local, but that metro goes all the way up into the UP as an MSA. So there are people from the UP coming, staying overnight. Eau Claire, Marquette, Michigan, Indianapolis, and St. Louis. And then we're able to look at this, and it's interesting. I'll explain a few things. We have things identified as primary points of interest. Those are things that we would consider from a tourism standpoint are a tourism draw. We can also do some other things. It's called a contextual. For instance, Rocket Stadium shows up in here. But that makes sense when you think about it. If they're hosting a team from over 50 miles away for a home game, they're here for more than 2 hours. So we can definitely see when Neenah High School has, we can do this on a weekend. We can tell you, you had visitors in, and we probably tell you who the visiting team was. Obviously, your top visited point of interest makes sense. It's the Best Western Premier Bridgewood. Over half of your visitors are overnight visitors in the community. Shattuck Park, Loop the Lake Trail, the Plaza at Gateway Park, really high numbers for an attraction that hasn't been open very long. We're hearing anecdotes from groups who are in town for a hockey tournament in the evening. The family's coming to Neenah because, and having had a hockey player, I never understood it, but I get it. The kids wanted to keep skating, and so they came to the plaza to skate. So we're seeing a lot of that transient traffic from visitors. And then, of course, your restaurants and your dining, Zacateca's, Zupa's, and then a lot of your retail shops as well. So I wanted to move through that as quickly as I could and be mindful of all your time, but happy to entertain any questions. Or if you wanted a deeper dive into any of the information that I shared, Director Hayes is your board appointee to the CVB's Board of Directors, and I'm happy to meet with anyone to talk about details as well.
Any questions from anyone? Alderman Skirms.
Pam, what aren't we doing that we ought to be doing?
What aren't you doing that you ought to be doing? I think I think your community development department, should be able to take a look at this data once like I said, we're still learning it too, and identify some potential business needs. There are some definite things that we see if we run an Appleton or a Grand Chute. that keep people in their communities longer. And it might just be a business mix of either maybe another, what I'll call sit-down restaurant. Just what we're seeing, larger sit-down restaurants. I think there's a huge opportunity, and it's not just Neenah, it's in multiple communities, for waterfront recreation. And how do we get people out on our water? We have visitors, and just finishing EIA week, I can't tell you how many requests I had for, hey, can I rent a cottage on your lake? But also looking for canoes, kayaks, boats. So I think water recreation is definitely something that you should look into. And bike rental. Fox Cities wide, if there's an initiative that I think the CVB needs to kind of take up the yoke of, is sort of a e-bike rental program that we can implement throughout the area to provide that connectivity.
Thank you.
Alderman Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Pam, I just have a question. I know we started out with this with the convention center and then the sports complex. And I'm just curious, what community is next to do something, and are we far off from that? What's the time frame?
As far as
Projects?
sort of project development, funny you should ask. So we did last year, the CVB funded what we called a destination master plan, and it really looked at the entire region in a 10-year master planning process, or where are the investments in infrastructure that we would need to make. A couple things bubbled to the top, and I think in the next year, hopefully, we'll be able to foster a little bit more thinking on them. One was an indoor music venue, not a theater space, more of a standing indoor music venue. And that's a project that right now CVB is working on with a couple other interested parties about doing a feasibility study. Where would it go? What would it look like? What's the capacity? So that's probably from a building type infrastructure. The other infrastructure that it just as important is connectivity, public transportation, trails, and airlift. So those were kind of the big things that came out of there.
I'm sorry, what was the last one?
Airlift, air service, and then winter events. Embracing winter. So, yeah, and everything that goes with embracing winter. So those are kind of the key areas that we've been told to look at, and we've got some things discussion, as well as an art trail. And I think we've got some great infrastructure for trails and art and putting them together. And I'd love to get some of that started via our grant program, where we can invest some room tax dollars into things like art trails and get that program, so we can foster something like that throughout, not in multiple communities, but where every community that we serve can tap into that program.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you so much, Pam. Really appreciated it. Really enjoyed working on that destination marketing plan, and I look forward to all kinds of fun stuff to come.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you for your time.
Next item on the agenda, introduction and confirmation of mayor's appointments. There are none. Is there any objection to unanimous consent of the approval of the council minutes and proceedings of July 19th regular session? Any objection? Seeing none, those council minutes and proceedings are approved. The next item on the agenda is the public hearing. The first public hearing is consideration of special assessment for benefits conferred upon property by constructing and installing a 2-inch asphalt mat for properties on Honor Street and Freedom Acre subdivision, and Founder Street, Honor Street, and Liberty Avenue, and homes at Freedom Acres subdivision. I'd like to open up that public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak in that public hearing? Is there anyone who would like to speak in that public hearing? Seeing no one, I will close that public hearing. The second public hearing is consideration of special use permit request by Neenah Water Utility to construct a water pump building on property located at 1539 Freedom Meadows Drive. Neenah, Is there anyone who would like to speak during the public hearing on that item? Anyone? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing on that item. The next item on the agenda is the Plan Commission report pertaining to the public hearing. Alderman Steiner is absent, so I will read out the Plan Commission report. Commission recommends council approve a special use permit for a water booster station building located at 1539 Freedom Meadows Drive, subject to the conditions of the special use approval letter. Is there a motion? There's a motion by Alderman Lendrum, seconded by Alderman Borchert. Is there any discussion on this item? Alderman Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious, this piece of property, is it city-owned currently? How did we acquire it?
Yes, it
Yes.
is city-owned.
Yes, it is city-owned. It was acquired as part of the first edition of the Homes at Freedom Meadows subdivision, where it was platted and then ultimately deeded over to the water utility.
Great, thank you.
Is there any other discussion on this item? Seeing none, please cast your vote on this item using your voting device. That motion passes 8-0. The next item on the agenda is the public forum. Is there anyone present who would like to speak during the public forum portion of tonight's council meeting? Anyone who would like to speak? Seeing no one, I will close the public forum portion. Moving on then to the consent agenda. The Special Public Services and Safety Committee meeting that occurred earlier this evening. An item on the consent agenda would be the temporary extension of licensed premises for Gord's Pub at 210 Main Street to host a street dance on Friday, August 18th, 2023 from 6 to 10 p.m. in the Plexus parking lot. Is there any objection to unanimous consent of that item? Alderman Boyette.
I just have a question. Usually they have done this and blocked off Main Street. I'm just curious why the change. I mean, I'm okay with it. I just was curious what made the change. Is that how they came to us and asked for it to be there, or?
Yes, that is how the application was received in the clerk's office.
Do we know why?
I do not know why.
I guess it was
I'm
just
curious. It's
potentially a better
historically-
option for them than closing the street.
Yeah. No, I get it. It's just historically it's always been. So I was just wondering why this year different. That's all.
There's going to be just beer sold. There's going to be music from 6 to 10. And it's going to be all fenced off with because it's just a portion of the parking lot. And there's going to be no food trucks or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
I think it was just a better option for them, and it was offered to them as an option, so they took it.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks.
Is there any objection to unanimous consent of that item? Seeing none, that is approved. Next item on the agenda is reports of standing committees, Special Public Services and Safety Committee meeting of August 2nd. Chairman Lendrum.
Thank you, Mayor. We met the Special Public Services and Safety Committee meeting tonight just prior to council, and we have just one item reporting out, and that is consideration of committee recommendation regarding Resolution 2023-18, the relocation order for the South Commercial Street reconstruction between Stanley Street and Tyler Street. And this item will actually be acted on in a minute under the Special Plan Commission meeting. And that's all I have.
Thank you for your report. The regular Public Services and Safety Committee meeting of July 25th was canceled. The regular Finance and Personnel Committee meeting of July 24th was canceled. So next item on the agenda is the Special Plan Commission meeting of July 31st, 2023. That would be Alderman Steiner reporting, and in his absence, I will report on that. Council approved Resolution 2023-18, the relocation order for the South Commercial Street reconstruction between Stanley Street and Tyler Street. Is there a motion to approve? So motion by Alderman Stevenson, seconded by Alderman Lendrum. Is there any discussion? Alderman Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious, the funding source for this, and do we have an amount?
The amount is to be determined as we negotiate the interests that are required for the project. The funding source will be the capital budgeted items that we've laid out from 22 and 23.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, please cast your vote on your voting device to approve Resolution 2023-18.
Yes.
That motion passes 8-0. The next item on the agenda, the regular Plan Commission meeting of July 25th. I will report out for Alderman Steiner. The Commission recommends Council approve ordinance number 2023-10 for the project plan for Discover Little Miracles Daycare located at 1554 South Commercial Street, subject to the conditions of the project plan approval letter. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
It's a motion by Alderman Stevenson, seconded by Alderman Borchert. Are there any questions on this item? Alderman Skirms.
Thank you. I read the minutes, and frankly, I was lost on this. It sounded like we're worried about traffic, ingress, egress. We're worried about the play area, worried about the side. What was agreed to? I mean, the ordinance says, yes, we're going to do everything that we asked, but I lost track of what we asked.
Yeah, so the initial proposal was to construct the outdoor play area, which would be fenced on the far west end of the parking lot,
Yep.
and basically the entire width of where the parking was located.
Yep.
Staff had recommended, and ultimately council had also recommended, that that area be reduced in size so that the fenced-in play area doesn't extend north of the front of the building. So it's a smaller area. In addition, there was requirements for some bollards to be placed specifically at the corners to avoid any cars from turning into it. And the area was also reduced in width to allow a minimum 15-foot drive aisle, which the original, I think, was 14.
And the loss of parking concern has been addressed, and Zupas and all that.
Yeah, so I think at Plan Commission, the discussion regarding parking was the Zupas was basically busy at lunchtime. Drop off for daycare was in the morning, and pickup was, so the hours didn't really clash at all. So the parking wasn't an issue, and they still meet minimum parking.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions on this item?
Just to clarify again, so the drawing we have in the minutes is correct or not correct?
What drawing are you referring to?
Page 96, no, 96 of 100 maybe?
This is the drawing. So they had submitted a drawing. This is the drawing, basically graphically showing our recommendation from Plan Commission.
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, please cast your vote for the approval of ordinance number 2023-10. That motion passes 8-0. The next item on the agenda is the Community Development Authority. Is there any report?
No report, Mayor.
Sustainable Neenah Committee. Is there any report, Alderman Lundrum?
Thank you, Mayor. If you are interested in rain barrels, please contact me. We have Sustainable Neenah has access to a large amount of rain barrels that we can provide to you free. You would just need to buy the spigot. We have the link on Amazon for you, and we will actually show you how to install it on your rain barrel. And you don't want it too low, you don't want it too high, so it's best that you come to us and find out the perfect way to put in that spigot. So contact me if you are interested. Also, if you are interested in urban gardening, I have a great video that you'll want to see. So contact me on that too. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your report. Bergstrom Mahler Museum, Alderman Borchert.
Yeah, the 2023 Glass Arts Festival will be taking place from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday, August 12th. They are in need of volunteers, so if you or family members would like to volunteer, please contact the Bergstrom.
Thank you for your report. Parks and Recreation Commission, Alderman Weber.
Thank you, Mayor. The Park and Rec Commission met on July 20th. The minutes are on the city website. There's a few business items of note. There's additional discussion about the cameras at the Rec Park and Harbor, and those cameras are now active, and you can see those on the city's YouTube channel, so check that out. There was discussion on the committee and commission assignments, and those were set. And then there was also some review and discussion around the potential stormwater management facility agreement for at Douglas Park. So there's additional work to be done on that before that. And there was liaison reports as well, but Arrowhead Park, I'll wait for Alderman Hillstrom to give his update.
Okay.
That ends my report.
Thank you for your report. The next item on the agenda, are there any petitions? There are no petitions. Any council directives? No council directives. Any unfinished business? Alderman Erickson.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just wondering if you have a date for the security training for the council meeting?
Yes. Will be the first council meeting in September, I believe. Sorry, that's a little ways out, but that was the first availability, since I will be missing from the next council meeting. Alderman Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious if we can get an update on potential meeting date for the information regarding the TARF.
What particularly are you looking
Well,
for?
I tried to do a council directive on it, and it got sent to finance, and then finance hasn't put it on the agenda because we're waiting on, well, fingers got pointed to Jerry Kaiser. So I'm just curious if we have a date for that yet. It's been like 4 months. I'm just looking for updates.
I had sent an email with an update, and it said that I was waiting for the numbers to come for budget time, that we were going to work on that and see where we're at with TARF, and that's when Jerry was available to do it, so I wasn't pointing fingers, but I need him involved with that.
Correct.
So we are going to be doing that with the budget here.
So now it's not the end of the summer, now it's budget time?
I did say that in my email that
I received a message from Director Kaiser that said, due to the time that he needed to get it taken care of and everything else that was going on with the summer, it would be at the end of the summer, early fall.
Okay, I can't speak for him, but in the email I had sent it, we had said we would be looking at that with the budget process because that would help us know because it's still okay through through 2023.
So again, we're just going to do this with budget. We're not going to schedule this for a meeting then.
If Jerry has numbers ahead of time, I don't believe he does. And I know that we are also looking into making sure TARF is still something we can do going forward that I'm working with the city attorney on. So I did respond to your
I understand. It's just, I, as well as some of the citizens, are concerned that it's taking so long just to find out basic answers, where we're at, if it's working, et cetera. Kind of find it hard to believe that after 4+ years, we don't have a running tally of expenses or costs that we can just say, hey, it's working or it's not working.
And that's what you're looking for then? as
Well, to start with, yeah.
Okay, well, I wasn't under that understanding. I thought you wanted to know the new tariff after the first 5 years here.
Maybe that's something that you could come in and discuss with Director Rasmussen one-on-one. Is there any additional unfinished business? New business, Arrowhead Park Development Status Report. Alderman Hillstrom, do you have anything to report?
Nothing to report, Mayor.
We will be reconnecting for a task force meeting with the Arrowhead Park Task Force Group on August 23rd. So that's coming up relatively soon. I'm sorry, I didn't update you with this, Alderman Hillstrom. We did finally complete Martinson and Isley completed the land survey of the Arrowhead Park property, which was a very long and detailed process. We're very glad that that was completed. And now that information has been passed along to RDG, and we'll be regathering with them very soon. Are there any other announcements that could come before the council? Any new business? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? There's a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.
Broadcasts of the City of Neenah Common Council meetings are produced by University Studios of the University of Wisconsin, Fox Valley. Neenah residents can get information about City Council meetings, City Committee meetings, meeting agendas, and other documents via the City website, www.neenahgov.org. Neenah residents can express their opinions about city issues or about these broadcasts by contacting the mayor's office, contacting their city alderman, or by completing the electronic feedback form on the city website, www.neenahgov.org. All public portions of the meetings are recorded in entirety and are not edited for playback.